If I do presenter view, is that going to work? All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Gaia Dempsey, and I'm a founding team member of Daqri. Really excited to be here today with all of us at ARE participating and sponsoring the event this year. The overall theme is tourism and navigation in AR, and I'd like to take this opportunity to talk a little bit about some of the design challenges around where that can go. So my talk is about serendipity, designing for serendipity, and some of the discovery mechanisms and design challenges that comes with. So serendipity is a really interesting concept. It actually comes from Horace Walpole, who coined the term in 1754. He read a story about 3 Persian princes, and they were always discovering things that were not what they had intended or set out to find out about. And so there's this sense of accidental discovery. It's always something that's fortunate or positive or sagacious. You don't say, oh, what a serendipitous thing if something happens that you didn't want. And it's been closely connected to scientific discovery throughout history. So there are these sort of mythologizations of serendipitous scientific discovery. We have, going back to Archimedes and the discovery of how to measure volume in the bathtub, and Newton discovering gravity when an apple fell on his head. So there's sort of this idea that when we are encountering things that are unexpected and unplanned, we're open in a different way. We're able to surprise ourselves and come up with ideas that we wouldn't have been able to imagine before. So in that sense, serendipity empowers highly adaptive behavior, and that's part of the reason why it's so important. There's also this sense on the web today that we're sort of losing some of our serendipity. We're sort of losing some of these opportunities to come across things that are unexpected. In the early days of the web, you could come across things, discover things, type in a URL and not know what you were going to find. And now a lot of the properties on the web have personalization algorithms that are so strong that we are often coming across things that are expected or so highly curated that we're seeing things that we already agree with, that we already know about, and so we're sort of losing some opportunities to challenge our ideas and grow in that way. So there's this movement called the whole news movement that you may have heard of that talks about this very phenomenon. When you're on Facebook or you're on Google, who wants to hear the truth when you can hear you're right, when you can see something that's targeted to something that you're likely to click on? It's a profit-based motive. You know, let's increase our click-through rates by personalizing content to the extent that people are going to see what they already want to see. And to some extent, personalization is very convenient and definitely has a place. But I also think that it's really important to make room for serendipity and make room for ideas and new things that we weren't expecting before. So today I'd like to talk about AR as a navigation and discovery tool. And as we go through some of these examples, thinking about where there's room for serendipity and where that can work well, and certainly where it can work hand in hand with dynamic personalization, and how those can be interwoven so that they're the most useful to us. So there's kind of this dichotomy of dynamic personalization and where that will break down, and then also unplanned serendipity and where there's space for that, where there's space for surprise. So here's a potential vision of a future interface where we would be planning a trip, engaging on a trip, engaging with the data that we brought with us and engaging with new data that we're discovering there. This has been a dream that I've always had, to have an interface for travel where you can persistently bookmark places, make things instantly shareable, have live interactive experience journals. Where was that wine bar and which wine did I like? and where are the photos that I took at this place, and where was the last time I was here. So these are the kinds of things that are becoming possible now, and it's really exciting. What are some of the discovery mechanisms in dynamic personalization first? Some of the planned aspects, the logistics of travel and having a visual itinerary could be very useful. Also, identity verification. You're at the airport and you can use your voice to verify who you are. So there's some of these things that we're going to know about beforehand that the interface can take account of. Also, expert curation is really important, working with museums, universities, even municipalities. When you arrive in a new city and you receive a data packet from that city, here's all of our information about public transportation, and here's some places that the locals recommend we don't think you should miss. Also, some really interesting experiences. We have some wonderful stories and narratives around trails and pilgrimages, the Oregon Trail and the Bavarian Trail in Germany and the Appalachian Trail. And so going through that travel experience and having a narrative as part of that in your interface could be really interesting. Also, social filters, that's going to be personalized. So that expert curation, I should say, that's going to be personalized. You're going to select the things that are interesting to you. If you're in Paris and you want to have a World War II tour of Paris because that's something that you're really interested in, you're going to want to see all of the different things that took place and images and things that are curated around your interest graph versus perhaps a foodie tour of Paris, and that's going to surface some different content. Social filters, seeing where your social graph has been, what they recommend to you, even potentially leaving personalized messages for each other, recommendations, or talk to this manager, or this is what I think you would really like here. Here's an example of a social filter, somebody traveling to a city they've never been to before and being able to see the city through the eyes of a friend. And what are some discovery mechanisms in unplanned serendipity? So this is where it gets interesting. Place-based discovery is something that I think can be really powerful and that can actually return serendipity to our lives with augmented reality. When you make an experience unique to a place, like a gentleman was saying earlier, that returns uniqueness to that moment. That's an experience that can't be had anywhere else. And that adds a level of specialness to that experience and to that place that rather than having homogeneity and ubiquity everywhere we go. It's nice to be able to travel somewhere and have something that's unique. So unplanned access to highly curated content and how you could discover something because perhaps you're passing by a World Heritage site and you've received, your GPS is alerting you, you've received some information about that site. There's some interesting opportunities for brand narratives that can be inserted as you travel through the world. And that's serendipitous. That's not going to be something that's pre-selected all the time. That's something that can be introduced in an unplanned way. And generally creating space for surprise as we design these new interfaces and experiences, and making sure that the surprises are welcome and a welcome part of the experience rather than perceived as an intrusion. From a technical perspective, some of these interfaces, we've talked a lot in the past about different types of AR, GPS-based AR and vision-based AR. And I just wanted to take a moment to talk about the idea that they're actually better when they work together. We shouldn't have to choose between one or the other. They work hand in hand. And this is a view where you can see things that are off in the distance, and then you also want to be able to interact with things that are near to you. This is just another example of an interface, travel interface. And some of the points I want to make here are, there are some use cases for visual information that can be passed between people that is pre-verbal, nonverbal, and eliminates language barriers. Also, notifications based on, maybe you're looking for something on your trip, and you should have notifications that are time sensitive and place sensitive. Where do you want to go, and can that system be cognizant of what's open around you? Is it going to give you a recommendation for something that's not even open, and how far away are you? You said that you wanted to ride by the Pantheon today, so you better get moving or you're not going to make it in time. And so that's cognizant of time and place. And there are some really good, interesting business opportunities around this type of curation. So the design challenge that we have before us, these are some of the questions that are important to consider when you're designing this type of interface. What type of content is appropriate, and which discovery mechanism is going to work better for that content? What's the user experience like? What works better to be curated versus personalized? Is it something that is culturally relevant to anyone who would see it, or is it something that you want to be personalized to that individual? And how can you incorporate ties to the physical urban space and possibly even the natural world? And looking at, are you using vision-based AR for that, or GPS? And what are the options that the user has when responding to the information that they're not expecting? Part of making an experience welcome is giving them options rather than forcing an experience or a long experience that they weren't planning for, or they didn't want it right in that moment. So can they bookmark it and save it for later? Is it something that they can share if it is relevant? Is it something that they need to create a profile for in order to interact with, or is it something that you can reduce the friction as much as possible? Media creation is really interesting in AR travel interfaces as well. Being able to take photos and videos and connect them to the places that you've been at, and share that across your social network, and then also have a persistent database that you carry with you. So one of the things that I've sort of been thinking a lot about as I've been exploring these themes is what is the larger kind of phenomenon that's happening here as we're designing these interfaces? And I came up with the concept of socio-mimicry, because I feel like in material sciences we have some really interesting experiences around biomimicry, where we're learning a lot from natural materials. Spider's silk is stronger than steel and yet so resilient and flexible. And in these interfaces and these systems that we're creating now, I think it's important to learn from the social infrastructure that has evolved and try to create digital experiences that can track to it intuitively. There's so much wisdom there. This didn't happen overnight, and the way that we interact socially should be preserved and in places improved upon, but not. A lot of social networks are trying now to kind of engineer that. With Google+, they're doing circles, and Facebook has smart lists, and just thinking deeply about how we can make it as intuitive as possible and as flexible as possible. Also, the kinesthetic accomplishment of social experiences. This is the dream, right? So you snap a picture with your fingers or by blinking your eyes. You share that photograph with a voice command, and you're actually able to bring more of your senses and more of your body into kinesthetically accomplishing social experiences and functional experiences. Making a place for discovery mechanisms that are not over-personalized. Sometimes, yes, it needs to be tailored to you, but in some cases, maybe you're visiting the Great Wall of China and you have some ideas about what you think is going to be the most interesting. There are some things that are going to be culturally relevant that are beyond your opinion, that everyone needs to know about when you're visiting a World Heritage site like that. And commonality of experience based on place. This, again, is something that we've sort of lost with the internet that I think that we need to pay attention to now. We have the opportunity to pay attention to with AR. When two people go to a place, the place doesn't change how it looks to each person. There's something about that commonality. Your perception can be different, but there's something about that commonality of experience that we have the chance to preserve. One thing that is also important to notice is that when we have interfaces everywhere, it is important to have an off switch and be cognizant when we're designing these systems that sometimes we're going to want to completely unplug and experience natural views the way that they were intended to be. And part of that could be a diminished reality that not only turns off your interfaces, but also obscures things like telephone lines and signs of buildings. So that's an interesting idea for an augmented or diminished reality experience that can really reconnect us with nature. Why does serendipity matter? I believe only serendipity can change the world, because if you're never exposed to things that you weren't expecting, if you're never exposed to connections and ideas that were not planned, you can't have great innovation. So we need to be able to surprise ourselves and make the most of serendipity and preserve it while we can. Thank you.
Any questions for Gaia?
Hi. Without customizing an AR experience for someone, do you think there is actually room to at least have a degree of personalization through AR, where somebody can at least have, the AR experience can acknowledge their name or whatever, and therefore instantly engage them even further into the immersive experience?
Absolutely. I think that it's really important to look at the interweaving of personalization and serendipity. In some cases, with the planned aspects or with the data that you bring with you, that's going to add value to the experience that you couldn't have if you were simply opening an interface that was trying to learn everything on the fly. So having profiles, having some selections beforehand based on your interest graph, based on your social network, are definitely very important.
So you laid out sort of a vision. Has your company actually built any of these?
This is our level of thinking, and this is where we're working today. So yes.
So your company has built some.
Some of these things are things that we're working on. Yeah, we have a creative lab at Daqri, and not all of this exists yet, but these are the types of things that we're exploring.
Similar question, like what do you consider a first tier? I mean, where's the adoption going to come from?
That's a great question. I'd like to postpone my answer until some of the first apps are built for goggles when they come out next year. Also, tweet us for free t-shirts.